Hello everyone, Rob Guest from football.london here and welcome to the latest episode of Gold Guest Talk Tottenham, sponsored by NordVPN. Joining me today is Alasdair Gold. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Hope you are as well. Yeah, it's let's just say back-to-back victories. Let's not talk too much about the FA Cup game, I reckon, and we'll just dive into everything else.
Yeah, never in doubt that result. Never in doubt at all. We will reflect on the 3-0 win at Tamworth. Comfortable it was not for the first 90 minutes or so. But as well as that, we're going to be previewing Wednesday evening's North London derby at the Emirates Stadium. But first, we're going to be discussing what Ange had to say in his pre-match press conference at Hotspur Way today. You were there. I think the headline news is obviously Richarlison's back from his injury, been out for 2 months now with the hamstring issue, but he's back. But in the world of Tottenham Hotspur, having one player back means someone else has to miss out through injury now, and that's Timo Werner.
It is the rule of Spurs. With one hand they giveth, and the other they taketh away. Yeah, Richarlison back. Right, let's start with a positive. That's obviously a good thing. We know he's been back in training, and we know they're being very, very, very cautious with him this time because of what happened last time. And let's be honest, what's happened quite a few times, unfortunately, during his Tottenham tenure, and that is he seems to pick up an injury or two or three or four. So this time they've really been giving in extra time on the training pitches with the team. This has like been full training. It's not been individual stuff. Just to see how he holds up, get him back into it, get him back into kind of the rhythm of things and seeing how his body holds up. And now they're finally confident, which could be the worst thing possible when it comes to Spurs and injuries, but they appear to be confident that he can now take part. And to be honest, it's a good game to bring him back into in terms of, let's be honest, Richarlison likes how do we put it, a fiery game. He likes those where he can be a bit of a nuisance and a pest, and he can certainly do that at the Emirates. So hopefully he'll come off the bench. You'd imagine towards the end of the game. I'd wonder with the extra work he's been doing, whether he can get a bit more than had he come back last week. Maybe he can come on for half an hour or so or more rather than perhaps the 10, 15 minutes he might have got. We'll see. But yes, so Richarlison back, and that's big for really their options, I think, in terms of kind of just being able later in the game to give Solanke a rest, or give him some support up there, or even play Richarlison down the wing. Richarlison has set up Solanke for a goal, hasn't he, already? I know that was his kind of brief cameo before he headed off again. But yeah, I think he's a big plus. Timo Werner going, definitely social media didn't feel that was the worst thing in the world. He's picked up a hamstring injury. They're waiting to find out the kind of extent of that from scans. I would say it's still, there's twofold to this, really. There's the fact that it's another attacking option that he can't turn to, Postecoglou, at a time when he just cannot be, anyone can be blasé about Spurs being able to turn to certain attacking options, although he does have Mikey Moore back, who we'll talk about with the Cup game. But also, if anyone did have any hopes, I know there's some Spurs fans that just really don't like Timo Werner. If he's got a hamstring injury, he's definitely not going anywhere in this January transfer window. So if anything, if you're one that wants Timo Werner to leave, and certainly Postecoglou has indicated that he wasn't going to anyway, but if there was any late interest in him, a hamstring injury is probably going to scupper that. But yes, it is one in, one out with the injuries. No Rodrigo Bentancur yet. I think probably with the protocols involved, it's his second concussion as well of the season. I think it's probably going to be Hoffenheim. I would imagine it'll be the one that he's back and available for rather than Everton, but we'll see. But yeah, then everyone else, we kind of know the rough timelines with them all, that possibly Ben Davies may be back slightly quicker ahead of the Romero and Van der Ven, who appear are certainly supposed to be towards the back end of this month. Odebear's obviously going to be a longer chunk of the season out. Am I missing anyone else? I'm sure there's some really obvious ones. Vicario. Vicario, he posted this week, didn't he, that back in training. And it was very much, you could see it was a response to Kinski obviously playing so well and all of that. We haven't got the impression that he's that close yet. I presume that's maybe more being out on the grass and stuff like that. And a bit like Odebear was. It was always meant to be, I think it was late Feb, wasn't it? That Ange said.
I think that's what Ange said in a press conference a week or two ago, maybe.
Yeah, so they're starting to kind of filter back, but as Ange keeps using the expression, the next cab off the rank is the one he keeps using with each player that comes back. But this is Spurs, so yeah, I'm sure others will end up taking their place at some point.
I mean, we're pretty much halfway point in January now, so it should only be a couple more weeks until Romero, Van der Ven are back. But I think having Richarlison back tomorrow is, a big plus for Spurs because, as you said, he's exactly the type of player you want for a derby encounter. I think that was clear to see in his last appearance in the North London derby back in April when he came off the bench when Spurs were 3-0 down and, almost inspired a bit of a unlikely comeback because he's a nuisance, he's a pest. He makes life difficult for defenders with his, never say die attitude, his physicality, his running and his determination as well. So I think that's a big plus to have him, just to bring him off the bench, even if it's last 10, 15 minutes, whatever, someone who can have a big say in the final third. And I agree with you. I think he can be a viable option from the left as well, because that's the last position we saw him in the Tottenham shirt against Villa when he replaced Son. But I suppose it's just nice to have an alternative to Solanke now because Spurs have been crying out for it for the past 2 months.
Are you excited on a personal level that you can ask Ange questions about him again?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great question from you today to him about Richarlison.
Well, let's be honest, someone did tell me to ask it.
Yeah, I think it needed asking as well.
I love the way you tried to pin that on me, fully aware that it was your question you wanted me to ask. It was a good question, don't get me wrong.
Well, you asked the suggestions, so
I did. This is the thing with having a press conference now. We're having about 4 a week now. Like almost every other day, there's a press conference. So we are kind of trying to think of topics that we haven't covered and things that people want to know about. And I knew if I turned to you, you'd give me a good Richarlison question, and there it was. And it'd be good to see him back in action.
Yeah, definitely. If he wants to take it steady on Sunday at Goodison, that'd be great after what happened last year.
Oh, yeah, I forgot he's back for that. Yeah, that's good timing.
But I suppose it's just a shame, really, in terms of if Tamworth didn't have a 3G pitch, then he maybe would have got some minutes in Staffordshire on Sunday. But that wasn't the case. And I think in terms of Werner coming back, that probably would have hurt Spurs 2 weeks ago when Mikey Moore and Richarlison wouldn't be back.
Yeah.
Because I think for the Liverpool game the other day, Spurs did have a number of attacking options back on the bench, and that's exactly what you want to see. But given what Spurs have gone through on the injury front this year, you just don't want to be seeing more players just adding to the treatment room, really.
No, it's been ridiculous. I mean, I know we're going to talk about the Arsenal game in a moment anyway, but he was asked if he had any sympathy for Mikel Arteta and their injuries right now. I think, to be fair to the question, or the reporter that asked the question, I think it was more like you can understand it more. That's I think was the tone of the question, but it came across as sympathy, and obviously, and straight away just was like, do they have any sympathy for me? I don't think so. And yeah, even with Arsenal kind of losing a few attacking players, they're still nowhere near the levels of what Spurs are still dealing with, let alone have been. But it's just the difference it makes that he's got a bench that he can viably turn to people and bring them on. We know there's been young players, and I know people have been desperate to see them. But let's be honest, in certain situations, you're probably going to naturally kind of lean towards your senior players that you've already got on the pitch rather than making that sub. Because, you do. You run the risk of kind of stunting their development, throwing them into a situation that maybe they're not entirely ready for. Whereas if your team were winning, it's a different thing and you can bring them on and it's an easier transition for them. But to now have a bench that, I know he is a young player, but obviously he's one that is now kind of experienced in the first team ways. You've got Mikey Moore to come on and cause problems. You've got Richarlison to come on and cause problems. And whoever else is going to be on that bench, it should be a little bit busier a bench. And that's going to be very important for Ange.
Another one of the talking points from the press conferences, Ange was asked about transfer outgoings, if any more is going to happen, and basically said they can't really afford to be having players out the door at the minute, given the situation. Alfie Dorrington joined Aberdeen on loan on Monday evening. Really good loan move for him. Potentially could make his debut at Ibrox against Rangers on Wednesday evening, which will be quite the occasion. And they also said Will Lancashire possibly could be heading out the door. And I suppose that's one that definitely makes sense. Richarlison back for now. For how long, we don't know. But Ange hinted the other day that he wants a new striker, new attacking option coming in through the door at some point. So then if you have Solanke, a new striker, Richarlison, it makes sense for Will Lancashire just to go out and get that first team experience that he needs to get under his belt.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we said at the start of the window that he was unlikely at that point to go out unless they brought in someone else. And that kind of hints towards that they are really pushing to bring in another attacker, really. Because like you say, there's no way on earth they would trust Richarlison right now to definitely be there throughout the rest of this season. And it's harsh. Well, it's not really harsh to say. It's unfortunate to say, but unfortunately, based on his record, it is probably a realistic concern. But yeah, with Will Lancashire, I must admit I was surprised he didn't at least get a chunk of time on Sunday. I know as the game wore on, it became a bit more difficult to do that, but I probably would have started him. But then again, maybe he felt to try to get into some kind of commanding position on Sunday in that tie and then bring on these other players, which obviously we know now with hindsight didn't happen. But yeah, he hasn't really had the opportunities that maybe we were kind of hoped he would have had after that little spell in the Europa League games and making his Premier League debut as well. And yeah, it's trying to think. It'd be interesting because I know there's been so much interest in him from sides at all levels through the Football League as well, and I think some in Europe as well over the last 12 months or so. So Spurs, there's no intention of letting him go anywhere permanently or anything like that. It will be just to get him now some experience for the rest of the season because he would have been itching to play football because he would have seen Jamie Donnelly, George Abbott, Josh Keeley, what they're doing right now, and Alfie Dorrington this week getting that move to Aberdeen, which is a terrific experience for him. And hopefully this is it. It's even like with Brandon Austin, we've said this before, it's about giving them the test. And it's like a sink or swim thing. If you can do it, great, then we'll trust you as well. As in Spurs, not you and I. But yeah, for Will, that's what he needs now. And you'd imagine they will hold off until they can get someone else through the door. That would probably be the sensible thing to do anyway. And in terms of, incomings, he kind of didn't say much on. He just said it's hard to say. Like most other clubs, January is a difficult one to really have any certainty about anything. There's a lot of things which need to come together. I think technically the question was about attacking signings as well. He said, I think I said last week the club is working really hard in that area, and if there are any developments, we will let everyone know. And then, and outgoings that they can't afford to let anyone go. I think the question was kind of around Napoli's reported interest in Timo Werner. That'd be an interesting one. Antonio Conte taking Timo Werner off the Spurs' hands. But yeah, when it comes to Will Lancashire, get him out there, get him some game time, get him continuing his development. And if he can go somewhere, League One, Championship, whatever, get a few goals under his belt, he's going to come back probably really trying to fight for a spot next season as one of the options up front, really. Not saying he'll be the main option, but certainly challenging to get more game time than he has this season. And all part of his development.
Spurs certainly not going to be short on options for Lancashire, given the amount of goals he plundered last season for the under-21s. Done well in his game time this season, notably against Galatasaray when he scored. I just wonder, is he cup-tied now because he was in the squad? Or does that only if you play in the FA Cup?
Surely it's only if you play, you'd think.
Yeah, so potentially...
deliberate maybe then?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just one of those. If Spurs had a bit of a handsome lead after an hour or so, then he would have come on. I was surprised he didn't start, to be honest, personally, but we'll get to that in a moment. First things first, North London derby at the Emirates Stadium.
Yep.
Tomorrow evening, a ground Tottenham don't really do too well at. I was looking at the stats earlier. 1 win from the last 8 North London derbies, that being the brilliant 3-0 win against Arsenal May 2022, which helped Spurs and Antonio Conte seal that Champions League place. I think it's 6 defeats in the last 8 against them. And that's something that needs to be put right.
Yeah, it's everyone that knows me when I talk about these games, especially the one at the Emirates, I just don't like them. They're never enjoyable. They're always a bit of a nightmare, and always invariably something goes wrong as well. It is a game that I know it's kind of Spurs, yes, do have this habit this season of they get a big result and then it doesn't really lead to much afterwards. But I think if you were to be able to go there and win a North London derby, it has to surely have a huge impact on where you go next and what you do next, because it just would fill you with the biggest confidence possible. And I would definitely never say there's a good time to play a team or anything like that, but at least in Spurs kind of help, or there's been that Arsenal have been slightly hit by a few injuries, Jesus and Saka not being there. Saka is someone that's terrorised Spurs in games, over the recent season. So that helps. And they haven't even got the young lad, is it Nweri?
Yeah, I think he's out. Ethan,
Yeah.
Nweri,
Yeah.
Ben White, I think. Yeah, they've got quite a few out, but obviously not to the level Spurs have out.
Yeah. But, as they say, every little helps. And if Spurs kind of want to kind of balance it up slightly in that way, that's going to help. Obviously, there's going to be the concerns over the defence still and the defending set pieces. First big test for Antonin Kinski as well, or Tony, as he's called around Spurs. It dealt well in the cup game with the aerial kind of threat that they brought. I know it's a very different kind of football, different team, but still, it's the English game, and it's a big long throw being chucked in the box, corners, free kicks thrown in there, and his handling was very good. Obviously, Guillermo Vaccaro hopefully will be filling him in on all the things to expect from Arsenal at set pieces, and in terms of the little kind of dark arts that they were doing as well. Although I think it was Ben White, wasn't it? It was the one that was pulling at his gloves and things before.
It was.
So at least it won't be him doing it this time. But yeah, it's going to be a test for that defense, which one benefit they've had from this little period is that they've just played alongside each other so much. There must be more of an understanding. I mean, they'll say, I would hope, 2 clean sheets in a row they've had, which I think, I think the last back-to-back clean sheets were, it was either September, October. It's a long, long, long time ago. And yes, I know one's against a non-league side, but anyone that watched, especially the 96th minute of the game, there was a very real chance that they could have scored in that moment anyway. So, yeah, it's a big game. There's going to be a load of battles across the pitch. I think the other leveler, hopefully, was the fact that after Spurs having to play extra time, so did Arsenal, and more of their players played the 2 hours. Certainly key players. I think Gabriel, Saliba, who else? Odegaard, Havertz. I feel like there was someone else key as well did the too. But it's all little things I think to cling to. That's what I'm doing. I'm just clinging to these little kind of hopeful kind of pearls of hope, I guess. But yeah, Spurs shouldn't go there and fear them. They've had some big games this season where they've played very well, even with an absolutely threadbare squad. So they shouldn't really go there and be fearful of anything, or the atmosphere. I think the atmosphere thing, they just have to think of Galatasaray and games like that. It just that must be that must have been the worst but best experience possible for a lot of these younger players. That nothing's going to be that bad in terms of the atmosphere, and it's just about being cohesive in their attacks as well. Solanke, technically ended up playing an hour, which probably wasn't the intention at all. But at least he'll have had more of a rest, and Kulusevski and Son coming on late as well, and Spence getting a little bit of a breather too. And they need to find some fluidity with the attacks and be good at the back as well, and win the midfield battle. So pretty much just everywhere across the pitch be better.
Spurs certainly can't afford to lose this one, because then that'd be an 11th Premier League defeat of the season.
Yeah.
Already trailing Brighton by 4 points. Brighton are 10th at the moment, so can't afford for that gap to increase in size, because Spurs will be going to Goodison on Sunday. I think the last 6 games at Goodison might have all been draws.
Sounds about
I
right.
don't think Spurs have won since the 6-2, which I think
Right.
was about 2017, 2018, maybe something like that. But yeah, in terms of tomorrow's game at Arsenal, Arsenal themselves need to win because they've still got title ambitions. They've not had the best of weeks leading up to the North London derby, lost at home to Newcastle in the Carabao Cup, went out in the FA Cup against Manchester United, and having watched both of those games, Arsenal had more than enough chances in both of those to go through, and they didn't take them. So I think that's what the worry is probably for Arsenal fans at the moment going into the games, that they're just not taking these chances. But given Spurs are turning up, they'll probably take them all tomorrow. The way it goes for Spurs at the Emirates. But I don't know if it's a good time to play them or not. But I think one thing Angel wants to do is just make an impact in the North London derby because he's not been on the winning side in one yet.
No, not at all. It's a big game for both teams. I know it normally is because it's a derby, but exactly like you say, both teams are at a bit of a pivotal point in their season. Arsenal need to not lose touch at the top. Spurs need to kind of make sure that, yeah, it's not just a cup focused season. You know, you can't just write off the league because you've had an iffy run of results kind of thing. You need to start getting a run together and getting back up that table, because the fixtures after this aren't as horrendous as maybe they have been in the last couple of weeks. You know, not knocking Everton or anything like that, because I do genuinely think that's going to be a tougher game now with the Moyes factor and all of that. But if they could get something, a positive performance result out of Wednesday night, then I think that kind of stands them in good stead for the rest of the kind of just this period, really, over the next couple of months to start building up a head of steam. And it's the kind of league, or the table anyway, at the moment where everyone's more than capable of dropping points. So yes, there's a little gap now, but if you can start to chip away at that, you're going to find yourself, I think, quite quickly rising up the table.
In terms of the team, then, I think it pretty much picks itself. It's probably just in midfield. The biggest, decision for Ange, really. Then Yves Bissouma is a certain start. I think he's played well in the past few games, including his cameo appearance against Newcastle. I thought it was really good that day as well. I think Lucas Bergvall deserves to start. I think he's been excellent the past few games. Then I think it's between one of Maddison or Sarr. I think in the London derby game, you probably got to need the legs and the energy from Sarr, which will probably mean Maddison's on the bench. But Maddison played better than Sarr at Tamworth the other day.
True.
It's one for Ange to decide, just getting that balance right. But I think in terms of the defence and attack and in goal, that pretty much picks itself.
Yeah, I would go for the team that started against Liverpool, but replacing Bentancur obviously with Sarr. I think so. I think you kind of have to. I think I don't think Johnson was particularly great at Tamworth, although he did contribute enough towards the end and in extra time, I guess, when it mattered. But I would then say you've kind of got a bench then, haven't you, of being able to bring on Maddison, Johnson, Richarlison, Moore, and suddenly like, oh my goodness, where have they come from? There's actually ways to change a game there, and it's different, you know. And I do think Bergvall deserves to start again. I asked Ange about him today actually, because I said about the thing that we've spoken about before, where the coaches back at Jurgard and Bromma Poikana both said that it'd need about 6 months. And here we are, 6 months in, and he's absolutely looks like a Premier League player now. And he said, really, just the most exciting thing about him is that there's so much more to come. He said it's just been a massive, massive year for him. But he is, he's waited for his opportunity and he's doing really, really well. Because it's like club and country as well. It's not even just Spurs. We kind of forget that Sweden, in an international level, he's getting his chance. So, yeah, I think you want that little bit of fearlessness in the game, and I think he'll bring that. I don't think he will be worried. That's essentially what Postecoglou football was about: is having people to make brave decisions with the ball and without it, and Bergvall will do that. The only thing I would slightly worry about him is losing his head a little bit because he won't have played in a game this kind of ferocious. I'm trying to think. The first game, did he come off the bench? You got better memory than me.
He might have done, but I think probably only 5 or 10 minutes if he did. I can't actually remember, to be honest.
I'm
Are
just
you
looking it up.
checking now?
I am. I'm trying to look it up as we speak. But either way, I think that would be my only concern, is that if he, the crowd start to get into his head maybe a little bit. And we saw that, he is capable of a slide tackle that goes slightly wrong. We've seen that very recently. I mean, I would play him. I would play him because I just think, yes, there's two 18-year-olds in the middle of your team, but they're two 18-year-olds that right now you can trust them. That they're playing the way the Postecoglou wants them to play. So I would start with him. I don't think Maddison will be happy. I'm sure he won't if he doesn't play. But then also, I still don't think he's been fantastic. Probably since the Man City game. That's probably the last time I remember him being absolutely fantastic. But he was actually quite good at the Emirates last season. That's the only thing I would say. He was good in that game.
Yeah, Bergvall didn't play in the North London derby. He didn't come on. He was on the bench.
Well,
Before we get on to discussing Tottenham's comfortable 3-0 win at Tamworth, first of all, Ali's going to tell us about the benefits of using NordVPN.
Yeah, I feel like we started a trend now of people telling us about their NordVPN experiences through Gold Guest Talk Tottenham, which is lovely. It kind of it saves me having to kind of rattle on myself about the virtues of NordVPN too much, because people have already heard me say that, and I can just kind of point to user experience. And we had a comment under our last YouTube video from at Hoyen14 who said, "Hello, Golden Guest. Great show. Here's one for you. I'm a Brit living in Czech Republic now. Thanks to Nord, brackets, I did use your link. Now I can watch a lot of content from the BBC and many sites like that." And then I'm going to read this anyway because it's interesting. He said, "Absolutely thrilled by the debut of Kinski, one of the best in the club history. The last I could remember was Jurgen Klinsmann versus Sheffield Wednesday. Come on, you Spurs." So after speaking last week about a family that had kind of moved to Lithuania and were using NordVPN to be able to access everything, now we've got people in the Czech Republic as well doing the same. And like I said last time, it works the other way as well. We can head off abroad on our holidays and use it to watch stuff from back home. Or the flip side of that is anyone can use their devices to watch stuff from abroad using NordVPN to making their device think they're in a completely different country. And on top of that, it's helpful in certain security aspects if you're using public Wi-Fi and things like that. It's just a really, really helpful service that allows you to do so many things. And it is the fastest VPN in the world. And that means no buffering, no lagging, and you can stream your favorite shows from anywhere in the world without your bandwidth throttling. You might want to book flights or hotels or concert tickets or anything, but do it from the destination country you're going to rather than doing it from the UK. And NordVPN will allow you to switch your device to thinking it's in that country. So it can really save you money in the long run. And talking of saving money, to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/goldguest, and our exclusive podcast link will give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and the link, in case you just missed it there, is in the podcast episode description box.
Let's talk about Tottenham's 3-0 win at Tamworth in the FA Cup third round on Sunday at the Lamb Ground. Watching that, I mean, they could have quite easily gone out there in the 90 minutes, especially those couple of chances late on for Tamworth. And I think some might have gone into the game thinking Spurs are going to win this comfortably and run away with a big win, but it never quite happens for the Premier League teams when they go away to the National League sides in the FA Cup. I can remember going to Arsenal against Sutton a few years ago, and I think that was 2-0 Arsenal. West Ham almost went out against Kidderminster, I think 3 years ago, and needed the late equaliser and then prevailed in the end. And they're always close because, I mean, at the end of the day, this is their cup final for the players, probably the biggest game in their life, playing on telly. It's a chance to possibly get a move to another club. And I imagine it's Enaru, the left winger.
Yeah.
the lad who works in Zara during the week. I imagine he'll have a bit of interest in his services now,
Yeah,
because he was
100%.
fantastic, and there was a number of them who were really, really good. So Spurs had to make, they had to work really hard to get there in the end. You're looking at the score, looks comfortable, but it was far from that.
It really was. It was. Look, it was a great occasion. It was proper kind of FA Cup game in that respect. My background, as I started off doing non-league reporting, so I've been on the other side of that in terms of I've covered clubs that have had massive FA Cup games come to town, and I know how exciting yet stressful it is for them trying to suddenly, essentially, a lot of people being kind of volunteers and things like that, then suddenly have to operate on a Premier League club level, and it's very difficult. And they did so well. They put on a really good game, good atmosphere. The only thing I think slightly let it down is what Postecoglou was talking today in his press conference about. We've seen some of the stick he was getting from the fans, the Tamworth fans, which he took in good spirits on the whole. However, as he said today, 10% of it was like really vile, detestable stuff in his words, and they were throwing stuff at him as well, which we couldn't see from where we were. So I didn't realize that had happened, but that was a shame because everything else about what they did on the day was brilliant, and their players just put in a supreme effort. The chap from Zara, apparently someone was telling us he'd had a promotion this week at Zara. So it was like a big week for him. And the goalkeeper, Jazz Singh, I think he became a dad or had a child. I don't know if it's his first child or not, but the day before. Wow, what a weekend for him. That's incredible. And he was excellent. He pulled off some really good saves. One especially for Madison was very good. And look, there's elements to these things that should level a game. That's the crowd, the atmosphere. The pitch was definitely going to take a little bit of time to get used to. That's what Tamworth are used to playing on, every other week when they're at home. Whereas for Spurs, if you're going to be brutally honest, it's not the quality even of the artificial pitches at Hotspur Way, which you and I see when we're kind of walking to the press conferences and stuff. So there's definitely, the ball was skidding around a lot, and not many people were going for sliding tackles either. It's it's a bit like when we play five-a-side kind of thing. The burns you end up with down your legs when you're going for a sliding tackle. I think Burval was the only one I can remember coming on and doing that, and probably regretted it immediately afterwards. But yeah, I don't think any of that should really excuse some elements of Spurs' performance. I definitely think you have to go there and show you're a Premier League team, and there were some players who didn't do that. Some players, like you said, like Basuma, I thought Basuma went out there and was every inch the Premier League player. I thought they were bouncing off him, they were trying to get him, he was showing his strengths, his ability on the ball. I thought he was excellent. But yeah, some of the others didn't quite manage to show that they were at completely, or should have been at a different level. But hey, it's a cup game, and the key thing is Spurs got through it. That 96th minute, my word, the ball was kind of knocked in. Someone had, I think it was a volley, and Kinski thankfully kind of got down to it and held it. That could easily have been, that would have been a huge cup upset if a National League team knocked out, Tottenham Hotspur, 8-time winners of the competition. That would have been an amazing kind of end to it. But even at the final whistle, they know how well they've done. Actually, question for you before we move on: should there be replays?
Yeah, 100%. I think there should be replays, but I look at this one from the perspective of, if Tamworth want to go through against Tottenham, their best chance of doing so is in extra time and then possibly taking the game to penalties, because Tamworth aren't going to come to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and win, I don't think. But for me, the replay should still be there. And unfortunately, we don't have them anymore because of these bloated European calendars. Spurs having 2 more games in the Europa League this month, whereas previously in January, the midweek slots would be free for 3rd round replays, 4th round replays. But now it's not the case, unfortunately. A huge talking point in England last year, a number of clubs really unhappy about it. And I mean, you've got to feel for them getting a result against Spurs, and then you're having this once in a lifetime opportunity, maybe of playing at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, probably the greatest ground in England right now, maybe in Europe. But no, it's a real shame about the replays, but credit to Tamworth for forcing Spurs all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the moment I actually would say the moment it went to extra time, I don't think they were going to win the game. I think just purely on a fitness level, you could see they were really starting to flag. And whereas, Spurs can bring on Kulusevski, Son, and Spence for extra time, and then that was almost that really Spurs really just got past that 96th minute kind of moment, and then it was like, okay, now let's go and win this game kind of thing. Whereas, had they got the replay, while I don't think they would have a realistic kind of thought that they would have probably won it, it's just so, I know it's going back to the financial side of the game, but for a team at that level, the money spinning aspect of it, to have a share of the gate receipts at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, where even for a cup replay, you're probably getting more than 50,000 people in there, I'd say. And that would have been huge to them as well. So, no, I did feel for them in that respect. But after the game was fascinating as well, was like seeing Andy Peakes, the Tamworth manager, going over to Archie Gray and asking if someone could take a photo of him with him, and because he's a big Leeds fan apparently, so, and he asked for his shirt as well. And then talking of Archie Gray, seeing him going over to the fans, one cheeky fan, we were over there, and he was like, "If I give you my scarf, can I have your boots?" And it was like, and Archie Gray went, "All right, go on then." And he gave him one of them. It was really nice. He gave another little girl that was stood next to him the other boot. And there was this really nice moment where Archie Gray was like, "Can I really have your scarf?" And he was like a little kid. And the kid was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Are you sure your mum and dad will be all right with that?" And you could tell that Archie Gray genuinely wanted this like memento from the day. And even watching like Postecoglou waiting with some of the players down the little kind of like outdoor corridor of sorts, walkway towards the dressing rooms and all that sort of stuff, which obviously we'll have all seen the images. They're much smaller than those players are used to right now. Although Postecoglou spoke very well about it before the game when someone asked him about the players, like how would they adapt to all of that sort of stuff, and I think they were labelled like multi-million-pound footballers or something, and he said pretty much most of them came from that sort of kind of dressing rooms and pitches and stuff like that. Some far worse than that. It was a question that maybe looked at where they are now rather than what they'd come from. But no, it was just great watching him like interacting with Jed Spence. Like he was like taking the mickey out. Jed Spence was wearing this big furry hat on top of his head. He was wearing sunglasses and everything. And Ange, who we know is not one for small talk, he's laughing away there with him. It's clearly this kind of little, I think it's like a trust now, isn't there, in Jed? I think he's got, which is you can just kind of see it on and off the pitch as well, and watching the players like making that run, as it were, back to their coach and having all the fans trying to get autographs on them. It was just a really nice day, and from a reporter's perspective, no seats for us. We were standing by the edge of the pitches. As I say, it took me back to my non-league reporting days, and I had one guy shouted at me from the Spurs end, in a kind of jokey fashion. It was like, "Stop looking at your phone and watch the game, Alasdair." And I was like, I'm looking at the phone because I'm having to write my notes and stuff and run our live blog from my phone because that's what we were doing. But nah, I loved it. I loved all of that, apart from the little scare in the 96th minute, which didn't do my heart much good. But Spurs got through, and a tricky tie in the fourth round awaits.
Yeah, Aston Villa away. I think probably going to be looking at another Sunday fixture because the Liverpool Cup game is the Thursday beforehand. And I mean, that's going to be a pivotal week in Tottenham's season and in terms of their aspirations to win silverware this season, because possibly could maybe exit both competitions or go through. And then after that, if Spurs miss out on the top 8 of the Europa League, there's going to be a double-legged knockout round playoff tie the following week. So February is shaping up to be a key month. Not really an ideal draw in the FA Cup, certainly being away from home at Villa when you could have got a number of EFL sides. But looking at Tottenham's form at Villa Park since Villa returned to the Premier League in 2019, won 4 from 5 there. Only defeat was pretty much, which was seen as a European playoff, really, when Spurs and Villa were fighting for that Conference League place. Villa won it 2-1. I think that must have been like 2 games from the end of the season, May 2023. But yeah, we've seen Spurs away from home this season won at City, won at United, won 4-0 at Villa last season. So they've certainly got it in them to win away, but might be similar to the League Cup this season. If Spurs are going to go all the way, then they might have to beat the best teams in the Premier League to do so.
Yeah, I was about to say exactly that. In the League Cup, in the Carabao, they've beaten City, beaten United, 1-0 up at the moment against Liverpool as well. So they are having to do it the hard way, and it's a strange thing with Villa, isn't it? I'd say weirdly, Villa seem to kind of pull off frustrating results against Spurs at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, whereas when it's the opposite, when Spurs go to Villa Park, they seem to get the results there most of the time. It's not ideal, especially when you see all the other draws that were pulled out of the hat, and you kind of think that could have been Spurs, wouldn't it? That would have been nicer. But yeah, they're going to have to play a lot better than they did at Tamworth.
Yeah, one of the main talking points at Tamworth, I think, was the performances of Timo Werner, Brennan Johnson as well. They were the two players really a lot of fans were speaking about after the game. Do you want to just give us your thoughts? First of all, we'll start with Werner.
Yeah, Timo, it's difficult now because with the added information now that he's got a hamstring injury, we don't know when that happened, whether that was something he was carrying through the game. I don't know. However, the issue for me is just this lack of general confidence in his play. It's just got to a point now. They must be working with sports psychologists with him and things like that. But I'm sorry, but if you go through on a 1v1 against a non-league team, your brain should be screaming, I'm going to score this. It should be, with being a footballer of what he's done in his career, yes, as Champions League winner, he should have that confidence anyway. But if you're going through and everyone in the ground felt like, with no disrespect to him, but the non-league goalkeeper was going to save it. I don't think any of us thought that Timo Werner was going to put that ball past him. And it's such a massive shame, but it unfortunately seems to be the way his career is going at the moment. Did that. There were many more of these opportunities we've spoken about before where he has a chance to kind of really go for a bit of a foot race with the defender and just doesn't even really try. Again, could be because he was starting to feel his hamstring. We don't know. But it was just a real kind of another bit of a lackluster performance from him. There's certain things that he does well, and we talk about them all the time. It's beating his man and putting a low ball across. But there's so many other occasions when he can do so much more, and it just doesn't feel like he does. It's just what his decisions in key moments. I think that's his issue, really. He did have he had a header from Mikey Moore's cross, I think it was, that was cleared off the line. That wasn't too bad. But yeah, he's probably up there with the most frustrating players I've ever kind of had to cover at Spurs. And we've covered Tonga and Dembele, so we have seen the heights of frustration. And I just think with Timo, it's just, you can't fault him as a kind of like a person. You can't really fault apparently his application in training as well. Everyone says he's really good in training, but just something happens when he steps across that line to play football matches where just there's moments when he really seems a little bit disconnected with the game almost. And yeah, I'm sorry, but attacking players against a non-league team should really be, and this is not meant to be disrespectful, it's just purely when you're talking about the levels involved, they should be looking to fill their boots. And he just didn't look like he was ever going to do that. Mikey Moore's second half brought so much more than Timo Werner did. And that's a player that's been out for a couple of months and clearly was rusty in the first 45 minutes. But they didn't know what to do with him, Mikey. And it was only because it was that hour mark after coming back when he was always going to probably come off. I think actually Postecoglou said he played for longer than they wanted Mikey. But yeah, I'm sorry. You can't be a 28-year-old Champions League winner and have a 17-year-old kind of showing you up on the day and how to do things.
Yeah, I think frustration is the word, because we've seen before what he could do in Germany with Leipzig. That's what got him to move to Chelsea in the first place. I thought it was better when he went to the left wing instead of up front. But I don't like how some fans might have said that he can't even score against a National League keeper, because I find that quite a bit disrespectful to Jazz Singh, who was in net.
I just said that, so you're saying I'm being disrespectful? I can't even say it.
Because I think he's a good keeper, and when said like that, it like comes across as like he's a terrible keeper, but he's played this
I,
massive role in, Tamworth getting to the third round.
Yeah, I get
Uh,
what you mean. I think what more where I was coming from, just to defend my honour, and Jazz Singh's in the same time. Jazz Singh had a really good game. What I meant more from Werner's perspective is he should have the confidence that he's
yeah,
going to beat that keeper.
yeah. Well, I think that should be the case anyway when you go through 1-on-1, regardless if that's a Premier
Yeah,
League keeper or a National League keeper. I don't think it matters in that situation, but I think that moment just showed his confidence is on the floor. I mean, he didn't even really trouble the Tamworth defence because, I mean, they were just physical, up for the fight, and Werner just looked the complete opposite in his play, very timid
I know
at
it's
times.
hindsight, but do you think it was a wrong decision to play him as a centre forward?
Maybe it might work better with Lancashire through the middle than Timo on the left, maybe Mikey on the right. But
Why
as you
not
said,
Brennan? Brennan Johnson's played there for Wales, hasn't
yeah, that's another option.
he?
I think it's clear to see Timo's probably better from the left rather than through the middle. But in terms of the other chances, I think he did everything right with the header, putting it back across where the ball came from. He's just
Yeah.
lucky there's a defender on the line. And then the other one, I think a defender took it in the face, didn't he, or chest from close range. That was blocked. He had
Oh
one.
yeah, I forgot about that one. Yeah, winded
Yeah,
him properly. Yeah.
yeah. I think he was unlucky with that. But I mean, we said before he probably just needs a goal, but he got one against City, and then nothing's really like improved since then.
Nah.
So it's just total frustration, really, because he's a player in there, but might not ever see it for Timo in a Spurs shirt. But Mikey Moore, I thought, was really bright in the second half, struggled a bit in the first half. But I think the case for everyone was you don't play on the 3G pitch, so you need to get used to the bounce and how the ball moves on it. And it was a bit of a leveler, totally, because Tamworth play on it week in, week out. Then Brennan Johnson did contribute with some key moments in the game, the cross for the own goal, the ball through for Werner's chance, and then getting the goal for himself. But I thought he did very little in, the moments when it mattered, when he had the ball on his wing and looking to make an impact, really, in the final third. But then again, you can say he was there when it counted, really, putting the cross for the goal, getting the goal for himself. But again, it's just, you just want more from him because you know what he can do. And it's just, again, frustrating that you're coming up against a National League side, you're a Premier League player, and you're just not having that desired impact that you want to make on the game.
Yeah, he's a funny player. He's like has moments where you think like, oh, that's fantastic. Like that's incredible. Like the confidence, the technique, the ability. And then you have other moments and you're like, why didn't you try and get past him? Why haven't you tried to beat your man? Why haven't you tried to do this kind of thing? But the one thing he's got absolutely going for him right now is that regardless of all of that, and this is the key difference with Timo Werner or quite a few other players, is he does still, even in the kind of his, maybe you could even argue some of his worst performances, has an ability to make an impact on a game. And that's such a massive thing. And I think people kind of underestimate that slightly. And like I did my player ratings after the game, and I don't often kind of look at what people say, but I think because I was on the train and I just happened to have a little look at some of the things, and I saw a lot of people saying that Johnson should have had the same mark as Werner, and it's like you can't have one player who contributed nothing ultimately to the game cannot get the same mark as a player that scored a goal that essentially his deflected shot across the face of goal created another goal. Should have really had an assist for that 1v1 for Werner as well because he played him through. So yeah, you've got to have you've got to give something for that. There's got to be some credit for that. And the fact is, Brennan Johnson is Spurs' top scorer as well. It's like he's not awful. He's not a bad player at all. I do feel like with him though, whether it's a case of being overplayed, whether there's a worry about a hamstring injury or something, but yeah, it can be very frustrating that the pace that he does have, we don't get to see his pace too much. He can be terrific on the break. That's maybe the only times we get to see it. But the amount of times when you see him kind of squaring up against someone, he's got the ball at his feet, and then he tries to do that thing where he pushes the ball forward ever so slightly and hits an early low ball. And sometimes that works brilliantly, but obviously the majority of the time that's going to be cut out. I don't know, whether it's... I guess he's not a true winger in the winger sense, is it? He's one of those you kind of class as a forward. He kind of plays in this role that's in between. That's probably why he's better at coming into the box from the other side to hoover up crosses from the other side. Maybe that's why he scored so many goals. Whereas you wouldn't probably call him a classic winger like... I mean, even Mikey Moore isn't a classic winger, but you can see the way he kind of dances past people and gets the ball across, that's what he can become. But yeah, with Johnson, I can definitely understand the frustration when he's not fully flying at defenders like we know he should be able to do, and the fact that he can drift out of games if he's not doing that. But there's no denying that he makes an impact on games. And yes, I know people will say, well, he scored the third goal against a non-league side that were already beaten, but he still made an impact in the game on what the final scoreline would be, both through that and his involvement in the first goal and what should have been maybe a couple of assists in the game as well. But yes, he could do much more as well. And it'd be interesting to see, and this is Postecoglou's big thing right now, is that he feels people are judging the players at a time when they're playing almost every minute possible. And he feels it's fairer to judge them when they're coming in and out of the team, getting a rest, getting to start every other game and things like that. And we're seeing the best version of themselves. And perhaps that's going to be the case with a lot of them. With Johnson, I don't think you can apply that to Timo Werner because he's not starting every game. But with Johnson, maybe Sonny to a degree as well. Like Solanke, I don't think Solanke did very well when he came on actually against Tamworth. I thought he struggled a bit to kind of get to grips with the pitch and the fact that for some reason Spurs started lumping long balls up to him, which was a complete waste of time with the big Tamworth defenders. Although one of them did a fantastic pirouette, didn't he?
Yeah.
With the ball. And I think apparently Ange said to him after the game, moves like that, that'll get you in the door at our place kind of thing, which I thought was really nice.
So is he the centre-back Spurs are signing then this month?
That would be a shock, but who knows? It was... there's a lot of those players that I think just need a bit of a rest and they need to be able to show their best selves. But definitely there's still some elements of Johnson's game. I mean, what is he, 23? Again, it's like the Dragishin stuff. People kind of forget they're still learning. And he's a Spurs top scorer at 23. More's to come from them and from Moore as well.
Yep. Right, let's leave that there for today's latest episode of Gold Guest Talk Tottenham. We're going to be back on Thursday to reflect on the North London derby, then look ahead to Sunday's game against Everton at Goodison Park. In the meantime, just keep with us at football.london for all your latest Tottenham news. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/goldguest. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box.